Well, it's supposed to be about 40 degrees today, but it looks like it's still a little bit chillier than that. And it looks like a great day to take out the Ridge Runner and throw some insulative layers on it, the top quilt, the under quilt, and see how they do. All right, we're all set up here, and a little bit closer to those trees than I thought I would be. This thing always looks a little bit smaller set up than I think it should be, but anyways, I've got the Onewind underquilt underneath, and I've got the blanket portion of that underquilt blanket combination on the inside. I believe they're both good to 40 degrees. You'll notice that I attached the underquilt to the suspension here with plastic hooks, and I prefer that to some of the metal that some people are using. I also have the sleeping pad, which I can slide in to that second layer if I need to, and inside my pack I have a top quilt that's supposed to be good to 35 to 50 degrees, so I'm going to try that as well and just see how well all this stuff works together. The Onewind is not particularly made for this kind of hammock, but it fits pretty well. If it works well, then it's a good deal. Well, I've unzipped the bugnet, but I've left the ridgeline attached. And there's some benefit to that. What I did was initially the underquilt, I felt some cold along both sides. So what I did was I took the elastic off of these D-rings and hooked them together from side to side and ran it over the ridgeline, which you can't really see there. And that helped a bit. And I think there's just too much room between the underquilt and the hammock, so that helps pull it in and helps hold the heat in a bit more. Well, I went ahead and I tightened the elastic on the ends and on the sides, and I added the D-ring straps on the bottom there, and they just cross right over the ridgeline and connect to the other side, and that helps pull it in a little bit, but there's still that gap there, and I'm still getting a cold feeling on my shoulders mostly, and a little bit on my side, and I put the slate pad under me and I'm still feeling it. Thinking now I will take this blanket and put it on the under side with the other underquilt, and then I will get my top quilt and put it in with me. So that will be the next iteration here. So obviously in the wintertime you don't really need the bugnet. I just have it deployed right now because I'm using the ridge line to help support these elastic straps going off over from the side to side. I have the same thing going on this end, but it's pulling the bugnet right down on top of me. So I'll have to come up with some other way of doing it, and it might work better with a dedicated ridge line. What I'm thinking is making a ridge line that just runs from one end of the suspension to the other, up near the carabiner, doubling up that underquilt, and throwing the top quilt in with me is the next step here, and seeing if I can stay warm. So that's feeling better. I have my top quilt on now. I have both layers of the blanket snapped together. This feels very thin for something that's supposed to be good to 10 degrees. I really hope this modern insulation is just lighter and more efficient than the old stuff. It used to be in the old days you could buy a sleeping bag that the manufacturers rated in the old systems that they had in those days, you know, in the 80s and 90s. You could get a bag that was rated to 25 degrees and it would be good for into the teens. This newer stuff, even though it's supposed to be newer, more advanced technology, I really question whether it works as well as the old stuff sometime. Now typically in the wintertime I'll climb into a sleeping bag and I'll shiver for 10 or 15 minutes before I warm up, and hopefully don't have to go to the bathroom after the 15 minutes are up. But I forgot about that part, so I climbed in the hammock, and after 5 minutes I wasn't warm. I added in more layers, and now I'm hot. I'm wondering if I had given it another 10 minutes if I wouldn't have needed those extra layers. Maybe I should get up and pull out the sleeping pad and at least give the underquilt and underquilt blanket a chance to work on their own. Alright, I got rid of the sleep pad, and my butt feels slightly colder. My butt and my hips. I could probably throw some heating pads in there if I needed to underneath, between the hammock and the underquilt. That might warm things up a bit. Without the sleeping pad, I think you could still get 35 degrees out of the rest of the kit. Maybe my butt will warm up later. When I pulled the sleeping pad out, it was warm, so it was definitely absorbing my heat. That's it. Next shot. Cut away. Or do a dissolve. Do something. Don't just focus on me. And close-in trees are always good for pushing off from and getting a little bit of a swing going. Once again, this hammock does not feel tippy to me. Now I have tried to do the suspension at greater than 25 degrees. They recommend about 25, but I've been doing it, pitching it closer to 30, I think, and I think that helps. But irregardless, is irregardless a word? I don't know. Some people say it is. But irregardless, or regardless if irregardless is a word, not a word, whatever I mean to say, it just does not feel tippy. Nice and comfy for the most part. I could get used to this. I wish it was summer again. I should have bought this in May. Hi, how you doing? You really do get a better field of vision from side to side with these bridge hammocks than you do with the gathered end. Yeah. Makes you just feel like you have a little bit more security. If you heard a noise, you could just look out instead of having to sit up, pull the side of your hammock down. Make a lot of noise this way. You just tilt your head up and look off to the side. As you can see there, I have the elastic on the sides pulled as tight as I can get it, where the little cinch buckle thingy, that's all it can hold. If I tighten it anymore, it starts to slip. So I'm thinking if I made that ridge line and then I just took and maybe put an extra length of shot cord on here and then just made it on either side so it hooked up to that ridge line, that would help pull in that the side there. And there's still a little bit of a gap there. Still a little gap there where the heat is getting out, and I am feeling, my butt is right here, and I am feeling some cold there. So I'm thinking there's probably no way to really make it clip to the side of the hammock. So we just need something that somehow will pull this in a bit. That's the one from the other side. I don't know, maybe just two clips that will hold them together like that, but that's going to be kind of in the way. So I would think a ridge line just a foot or two above, and then hooking them up to that might do the trick. This hammock material is very taut, right underneath me, very taut. And the sensation it gives me when I'm laying in it is pretty much the same as if you've ever laid in the GI folding cots. It just reminds me a lot of that, where it's, if you've had a good night's sleep on those, you know what I'm talking about. And this makes me feel like I'm going to get a good night's sleep on this. That's the top quilt I was using. That's a Onewind. Supposedly the low end is 35 to 50 degrees. I would say it 35 is a good bottom end for this. Of course, I would wear more and probably get a few more degrees out of it. Today I pretty much dispensed with most of the stuff sacks except for the one for the hammock. The rest of them I just shoved everything in there, and I am thinking that's a good compromise. Alright, so ridgeline running from, say, here or here to the other end, and then you could run the elastic up from the side of the underquilt, and that might help pull it in better. As we can see here, without any weight in it, there's a little bit of space on the side where that warm air is getting out, and the cold air is getting in. But overall, I'd say this is probably going to be good for 35, maybe 30 degrees as is. Maybe with some tweaking I can get it lower. Conclusions. Well, the Onewind underquilt is not specifically made to be used with the Warbonnet Ridge Runner. That being said, it works, but I think to get the most out of it, you have to do some tweaking, and I still have a little bit more to do. At this point, I could say it's probably going to be good, depending on your metabolism and all of that. It's probably going to be good down into the 30s. You could probably take it lower if you're wearing more clothing or had more insulation, maybe one of those torso length underquilts or something that would go down under there and help keep your undercarriage warmer. I think a sleep pad is a good idea because it does provide some insulation, and I'm thinking especially around the shoulders and around the butt. That might be all that's required, and a little bit of tightening of the underquilt to tighten it up in certain areas to hold the heat in. All right, let's see what happens in the future with this.